The Ripple Effect, a journey through atomic habits. Amelia sat at her desk, staring at the pile of unfinished projects, half-written reports, and forgotten goals. She had always been someone who meant well. She'd set big goals for herself, dreamed about future success, and even bought countless books about personal development. But somehow, the dream always seemed distant, like a mirage that only faded as she tried to reach it. Her attempts at self-improvement often felt fleeting, like a spark that would quickly burn out. That was until a friend recommended a book that would change her perspective. Atomic Habits by James Clear. At first, she was skeptical. The idea of achieving big changes through tiny, almost imperceptible actions seemed too simple to be effective. But, with a mix of curiosity and desperation, she decided to give it a try. The first chapter introduced a concept that Amelia couldn't shake off: the power of compound growth, the idea that small, consistent habits, when repeated over time, could lead to profound changes in life, struck a chord. It sounded almost too good to be true. Yet, she felt a glimmer of hope. She had been focusing on the wrong things. Instead of waiting for a big breakthrough, she needed to focus on making small, deliberate improvements every single day. Amelia decided to take the first step. She had always struggled with exercise. The gym intimidated her, and the idea of spending an hour working out felt daunting. But after reading about the power of habit stacking, pairing a new habit with an existing one, she realized that she could start small. She decided to tie her new habit of stretching to her morning coffee ritual. Every day, after brewing her coffee, she would spend 5 minutes stretching. Just 5 minutes. It didn't sound like much, but it was a start. The first few days were a struggle. The coffee would brew, and she'd stand there, staring at the mat, unsure of what stretches to do. She felt awkward and self-conscious. But then, something strange happened. After a few days, stretching became automatic. She didn't have to think about it anymore. She'd pour her coffee, roll out the mat, and stretch. The habit had begun to take root, not through willpower, but through consistency. It wasn't just the physical stretch that changed. Amelia noticed her mind felt clearer, her body less stiff, and her energy levels higher. It was as though a subtle transformation was taking place. She hadn't solved all of her problems yet, but she had laid the foundation. Encouraged by her success with stretching, Amelia decided to tackle another area of her life: her tendency to procrastinate on reading. For years, she had dreamed of reading more books, but every time she picked one up, she would struggle to get through it. Inspired by the habit of 2-minute rule from Atomic Habits, the idea that any habit can be started with just a 2-minute commitment, she decided to read for just 2 minutes each night before bed. 2 minutes seemed laughable, but it worked. At first, the 2 minutes felt almost too short, but as she kept up the practice, the time began to extend naturally. She'd find herself absorbed in the book for longer periods. Soon, 2 minutes turned into 30. The books started piling up next to her bed, and Amelia began noticing something remarkable. Not only was she reading more, but the stories and knowledge she was absorbing gave her the clarity and confidence to tackle other challenges in her life. Months passed, and Amelia's life began to look very different. She had cultivated habits that were once foreign to her: a morning routine that involved stretching and journaling, an evening habit of reading and reflection, and even the habit of planning her day the night before. These small habits were like dominoes, each one tipping over the next and creating a ripple effect in her life. The real breakthrough came when Amelia realized that these small habits were shaping her identity. She wasn't just someone who stretched in the morning anymore. She was a person who took care of her body. She wasn't just reading 2 minutes a night, she was a lifelong learner. Her habits weren't separate actions, they were part of who she had become. One day, during a conversation with a colleague, Amelia found herself offering advice. Her colleague was struggling with balancing work and personal goals. Amelia shared her experience with Atomic Habits, explaining how she had started with small, consistent actions that gradually built into meaningful change. Her colleague was skeptical at first but decided to give it a try. Amelia couldn't help but smile as she thought about the ripple effect of her own small changes now inspiring someone else. As Amelia's life transformed, so did her perspective on success. She had always believed that success came from grand, life-altering decisions, but now she understood that success was a result of the invisible work, the small choices made daily. These atomic habits, as James Clear called them, weren't just about productivity or self-improvement, they were about becoming the person you wanted to be. Every time Amelia chose to stick to her habit, no matter how small, she was reinforcing the version of herself she wanted to become. There were still setbacks, of course. There were mornings when she didn't want to stretch, or nights when she was too tired to read. But because she had built a system that was rooted in simplicity, it was easier to get back on track. The key, she realized, wasn't perfection, it was consistency. As long as she showed up, even on the days when she didn't feel like it, her habits would continue to compound over time. Years passed, and Amelia continued to make small changes. Some habits faded, while others were replaced. She adapted and grew, always learning how to refine her approach. But at the heart of her transformation was the understanding that the little things mattered, the daily, seemingly insignificant actions that, when compounded, had the power to change everything. It wasn't about achieving instant results. It was about embracing the process. In the end, Amelia discovered that true transformation wasn't about big, dramatic shifts. It was about the tiny, atomic habits that, when compounded over time, led to extraordinary outcomes. And it was this realization that allowed her to build a life she could be proud of, a life shaped not by fleeting motivation, but by consistent, deliberate action. Amelia had learned the secret: success wasn't the result of a single monumental leap, but rather 1,000 tiny steps, each one building on the last. And it was in those tiny steps, those atomic habits, that the true power of change resided. Amelia had learned the secret: success wasn't the result of a single monumental leap, but rather 1,000 tiny steps, each one building on the last. And it was in those tiny steps, those atomic habits, that the true power of change resided.